Okay guys, this is Dean here, and I'm on the Aquarium Co-op channel tonight, and we're going to talk about angelfish care and what I've learned with angelfish care over probably 40-50 years of keeping them on and off, not steadily, but had them in my fish room or in my fish tanks for a long time. Bred a lot of them, kept a lot of them, and going to what I found that I do, or to have success, let's put it that way. As you can see, we got a tank of angelfish here. It's a 29-gallon tank. It's a little overloaded, but this gets a water change probably every other day. Quite a big water change because there's a lot of big angelfish in there. At home, if you wanted to do this, I would not get 13 angelfish for a 29-gallon tank, especially full-grown adults. And these are in here mainly as a holding facility while I'm getting another tank ready for them, but and to set up for pairing. So when you're looking at angelfish, you're probably going to be buying them from a store, and you want to look for angelfish either nickel, quarter size, maybe 50-cent piece size. I wouldn't get full-grown adults. They're usually back in the store for a reason. Either a breeder has surplus, actually, and that's what happens to some of mine. But generally, you're going to want to watch those angelfish grow as you keep them, and that's half the fun of any type of fish, is watching it grow from a young fish to a fully mature adult. So you want to pick fish that are not, and this might seem weird with angelfish, overly thin, because angelfish are a relatively thin fish, as you can see there, but you want them to be nice and meaty, especially in the head, the belly. You don't want a sunken belly, so you want to pick nice looking fish. If you can, have the store feed them, watch them eat. You want the aggressive eaters, the ones that are eating. Angelfish are prone to some diseases out there, and though they are curable, it's better to not have to do that. So I would pick just young, good-looking fish, meaty, especially in the head. You want them to have a relatively thick head, and you want their eyes to be clear. A cloudy eye is a sick fish. And that's pretty common sometimes in angelfish. Sometimes they will peck on each other, but it's going to weaken the fish. You don't want to have to go through having to treat that fish. Now, angelfish do well in just about any type of tank. I typically don't keep planted tanks, but I like plants in the tank. In this case, there's just a couple plants in pots and the Java fern on wood. Tanks that are planted look great. I feed this tank with Easy Green, as many of you have heard Easy Green before. It works fantastic. It's easy, just a couple squirts. You've got the plants taken care of. You could go into a fully planted tank with angelfish, or you could go into a bare tank with angelfish. Community tank with angelfish works also, as long as the fish in the community tank aren't too small. Like, for example, the little micro rasboras are probably going to be fish food for a larger angelfish. But a good sized cardinal tetra, black skirt tetra, any of those type, corridors catfish, I mean, mine here in with sturbe cories, they get along with each other just fine. Rainbows would work too, but rainbows are pretty aggressive when it comes to eating, and they might outcompete the angelfish for food. So just about any sort of community type tank. Now, tank size depends on how many fish you want. We've already discussed that this tank might be a little overcrowded for most users. Generally, a 29-gallon tank, I would do no more than 4 adults, especially if it was a community type tank, as well as some other catfish, plecos, stuff like that. I've kept angelfish myself in as small of tanks as 10-gallon tanks, full adults. I bred them in 10-gallon tanks, all the way up to 75-gallon tanks. They're pretty adaptable that way, as long as you don't overcrowd, and if you do overcrowd, make sure to keep up with water changes. They're not super picky about different types of water types. High pH, low pH, as long as you're not off the scale, high or low, you're fine. They can tolerate, I've kept them down to as low as 5 and as high as 8.6 with no problems. However, right around the middle in there, like 7, 7.2, 6.8 maybe, I find that to be the best pH. Hardness matters a little bit. Most angelfish now are adapted to hard water. A lot of them are tank or farm raised in Florida, where the water is fairly hard. So adapting them to softer water is really easy. And if you have in your area a local breeder that's willing to sell you or trade you some angelfish, that's always a good place to get them, especially if they're the type that you want. That kind of covers, pH and all that. Temperature, they're also pretty tolerant there. Generally, I like to keep mine at about 82 degrees. When I'm breeding, 82 really works. Raising them, 82. They will tolerate as low as 78, and they'll go as high as, typically people keep discus around 86 or so. They'll go as high as that easy. If I had, maybe 6 in here that I had grown from babies, I would probably end up getting a couple pairs out of that. And they will pair off, they will kind of section the tank off, and then you just pick, the best colored ones for the ones you want. And if you can tell the sex, you can always tell the sex after they breed, because female lays the eggs. Once you can tell the sex, if you want to mix up the pairs, they're pretty adaptable to doing that too, as long as you put the pair in the tank by itself. And I would typically try to spawn them in a 20-gallon high tank. Angels will be fine in a lower, like a 20 long or low tank like that, but their fins will extend better in a high tank, I found. For feeding them, all sorts of foods. They will take all sorts of foods. Right here I've got the newest food out is the Vibra Bites. They eat that stuff up. They will also take flakes. I happen to be a big fan of this flake by Sarah. Couple different reasons. First of all, it's not your ordinary. It's kind of, can you see that? Yeah. It's kind of a brown flake. More natural, it seems to me. Smells really good, although I wouldn't eat it. But and the fish tend to love it. I remember Corey talking about this, that the container's made thinner and the label's biodegradable, so Sarah is doing some stuff that way also. Right behind that, this is the Sarah Tropical Flakes, the Biped Nature series. They also make this treat mix, which has some dried shrimp and other things in it, and angelfish are really into those treats. They'll take the dried tubifex or dried bloodworms. However, frozen bloodworms works really good too. This is a great food to induce them to spawn because it helps fatten them up. Even though it seems to be mostly water, which is true, for some reason it helps fatten them up. For fry, I like to use a lot of the bug bites, and also one of my favorite is, and these are really easy to use because you can just stick them on the glass, is the O-Nip tabs. As you can see, I'm kind of a fan of Sarah foods. I feed a few others besides Sarah, but had really good success with these foods. So if your goal indeed is to spawn the angelfish, I would get no less than 6, raise them from small fish, from young fish to adults, let them pair off naturally. As you get more advanced, you can probably select males and females and pair them, but if you don't have that, let them pair off naturally, and either move the pair to a tank by itself or leave the pair in the tank that they paired off in and move the others to a tank by itself. When they spawn, the first couple spawns usually fail. They end up eating them because they're getting used to being parents also, and fish eat fish eggs. They must taste good, caviar, so with some time and patience, the right conditions, don't disturb them too much when they have the eggs. They will typically lay on something vertical, whether it's a stiff leaf, a filter pipe, or even the side of the tank. A lot of times, if it's just the tank, it'll be near the corner. They want to they want it to be a place where they can protect it from other fish. They will tend the eggs for about 5 days, and then they'll become free swimming somewhere between 5 and 7 days, and that is somewhat temperature related and somewhat how well they tend to eggs and if they want to move them. Typically they will move them while they're still a little bit sticky as wigglers to several different locations, and then they become free swimming and they try to keep the cloud of fry between them. At that time, you know, the fry will take newly hatched baby brine shrimp. I don't have a container of it here, but the Sarah Micron is another really good food. It's high in algae, especially I think spirulina. So it is really good for their growth and their well-being. And as they're growing, you do have to watch out because you're going to get 300 to 600 fry in a typical spawn. Don't expect all 300 to 600 to be raised to adults, because that will not happen, especially your first couple times. But you will notice that there are some deformities. And I know this is one of the toughest things, I think, in fish breeders' life, I guess you would say, is having to cull those deformities out. You can get missing pectoral fins, you can get twisted bodies, twisted spines, twisted tails. You're going to get some of all of that, and it could be just, you know, the parents have pecked that egg and it's caused a deformity in the very beginning. It could be just a genetic problem. But don't be afraid to cull those fish out. You know, there's different ways. You just, you know, Google, YouTube, how to euthanize fish, and you'll find a lot of different ways that work. So basically, those are some ideas of how I've kept them. And like I said before, I've kept them in all sorts of different tanks, all sorts of different settings, whether planted tanks, bare tanks, halfway bare tanks, together with other fish, by themselves. Over the last 40, 50 years, I've kept them all that way. One of the reasons that angels have almost always been in my fish room is, for lack of better words, it's a financial reason. They always sell. Angelfish are one of the fish that people always buy in a store. By having them in my fish room, in my possession, you know, it helps fund a lot of other projects. I mean, that's the honest truth. Is, you know, you can fund your whole fish room with a couple pairs of angelfish pretty easily, as long as you're not a massive fish room. But, you know, my size, easily funded by angelfish. So, you know, go out there if you're looking for a nice fish. We'll give these guys a little bit of food before we go, and you know, get yourself some angelfish. They're fun. There you go. Now they're having dinner. Thanks, guys, and we will see you on the next one. And you too.